Hello, everyone out there in TV land. I'm Julian. This is Lisa. And we want to welcome you to our program. We're going to be reading some love letters to you. I want to welcome you on behalf of Henrico Recreation and Parks. And let's jump right into it. Our program today is going to be 1918 letters of Sheppard, Crump, and Elizabeth Young Adam. The year is 1918, and the world is at war. What began as a crisis between Serbia and Austria-Hungary in 1914 has become a global conflict due to the numerous treaties each nation has with surrounding nations. Troops from the United States began to arrive to the frontline battles of Europe in mid-1918. Amongst those arriving troops is the H1N1 influenza A virus, known as the flu. The virus quickly spreads from ports to camps and to much of Europe by May 1918. The first outbreak would last from January to May 1918 and was considered rather mild, but claimed greater than 75,000 lives in the United States. A second wave began in August, but lasted until December. Over 4 months, more than 292,000 deaths were attributed to the flu in the United States alone. A third wave would strike in January of 1919 and would last until June. In the spring of 1920, a fourth wave hit the American cities such as Milwaukee, New York, Los Angeles, Detroit, Kansas City, Minneapolis, and St. Louis. Citizens were encouraged to wear masks in public, stay inside, and quarantine. Schools, theaters, and houses of worship were all closed. Public transportation was limited, and mass gatherings were banned. Across the United States, it is estimated that between 500,000 and 850,000 people died as a result of the virus. Internationally, it is estimated between 17 to 50 million people died of influenza. Sheppard Crump of Meadow Farm in Glen Allen enlisted in the Richmond Light Infantry Blues in 1903. During World War I, he served in France as a first lieutenant, but eventually would attain the rank of captain in the United States Army. Elizabeth Young Adam of Grove Avenue in Richmond was a longtime friend of Sheppard's. They would share a lot of friends and experiences before Shep was sent to France. Upon Sheppard's return from Europe, the young couple would begin a courtship which ended in marriage on February 13th, 1922. Dear Liz, this sure is a hell of a war for the letter you wrote on August 8th, arriving September 2nd, and the ones written July 26th and July 30th didn't get here until yesterday evening late. Can you beat it? Well, life goes on the same as ever with getting up before daylight, working on going to school most of the day, and school or gas drill after supper. We have been fed up on gas drill and started in wearing masks 1 hour daily and increase an hour each week. Imagine having a clothespin squeeze your nose so you can't breathe through it, but a rubber tube in your mouth to breathe through and a rubber mask all over your face with a tight band under chin and around face and forehead, and no matter how much it hurts, have to keep it on until permission is given to take it off, and you have some idea of what a gas mask feels like. If there is one place in hell hotter than the rest, it's reserved for the man who invented poison gas, and the Kaiser gets the next hottest. We don't get any Wednesday or Saturday noon half holidays and can only get into van on Saturday night and Sunday. I went in last Saturday night, and while there, I saw Derry Wright and had a few minutes chat. He was the same old Derry and said his years of experience in the blues had been of great service to him in breaking in the young officers from Camp Lee. He then had a bunch he was showing the sights. I sent the cap to you about 3 weeks ago and suppose you have received it by now, although nothing is guaranteed these days. I don't remember if I wrote you, but mail and everything else being unsatisfactory these days, you'll have to consider it a birthday present and take the will for the deed. It's been raining most of the time for a week, and with the wind howling at night, it surely sounds and feels like March in Virginia. Speaking of the weather in Virginia, sounds like a joke on my part. It's been so long since I lived there, And when I look back on those happy good old days when you and I used to burn around to the shows and go strolling the Beltline and Reservoir Park, it seems years and years and years ago. Really, Liz, I certainly do miss you and long to see you again, which I hope won't be long, and when I get to thinking about home and friends, I get so blue and homesick. I have to get up and go out where there is a bunch or start to reading or do something to get my mind off it. We are getting our material and equipment and expect to get away soon after October 1st, but you never know in this game. There has been an epidemic of influenza here and lots of our men have been down with it, but so far I've escaped. There have been 9 deaths from it in another regiment, and most of them were in the battery that used to be the Norfolk Blues. It was sure lucky you got the trip to Philly, as it broke the monotony of Richmond, and I understand as dead as can be now. So Rosalie decided to get into the war after all. You know Burnley is a yeoman and is located at Hampton Roads Naval Base. Tell Rosalie to look him up or drop him a line and introduce himself. It's all right, and I know he would like to meet her. His address is Burnley Crump, Yeoman 2nd Class, United States Navy, R2. Barracks K63, Naval Base Operating, Hampton Roads, Virginia. I'll also write and tell him about her being a friend of mine. I would like to see the West Hampton Hospital and get wounded, and if I get wounded, surely hope I'll be brought back and sent there. Will you promise to come and see me? Don't stand back just because Marvin suggests the Mellons were right, but be sure to go up and see Mama anyway, and besides, if you don't come, Ignatz will have his feeling hurt. I have found Mother to be quite liberal-minded about most things, and I'm sure she won't mind the riding trousers. Every time I hear from her, she seems to be happy, as the day is long with her adopted children, the pigs and collies. After all of us left, I think it was surely fortunate she had something to divert her mind and keep her occupied. She is one of the bravest women I know of and certainly stands up well. I hope you succeeded in getting your trip to New York, as it sure is some wonderful town. Fergie Nickery was sure lucky chap to get back to the state as instructor, not to mention getting married. And after being at the front a while, I would like to do the same myself, but I want to get there first and stay here long enough to get my goal straight. If you see Dago, again, give him my regards and tell him to write me news of Richmond. I don't think I'll lose my uniforms and truck, as we have plenty of transportation in the train. I think my trench coat looks pretty good, and if you want a first-hand opinion, ask Marion Turpin, as she was there the day I got it, and it was chilly, wore it for a while. Wish I could have been with you at the Jefferson for supper that time, as we surely did leave some fine little parties in the old days. We don't have much anything to do at this camp except work and save some money. After sending a good sum home to Mama, I have $125 of my July pay left, and I haven't touched my August pay yet. You always used to be kidding me about how much I drew from my Army pay. Well, since coming over and getting the special foreign service and quarters allotment, I now draw $262 a month and have another 10% increase of $17 coming next month for longevity. I guess it makes the pay of a captain, $200, look sick. A major draws back pay of $250, so I'm afraid they will send me home because I cost the government too much and get a cheap lieutenant to take my place. I suppose the Richmond roof may be a dead place since they cut out liquor. Do you remember the little party I gave on the roof that night and what a good time we had? I guess that old bunch is scattered all over the world. While on journey to Clough, I met a French major and his wife who live in Paris, and yesterday I received a letter from a young lady who said she was his cousin and introduced herself by mail. She described herself as a well-bred French young lady who spoke English fluently. If I desired to correspond to her, she would like to write to me. I also met a young widow at a reception in Poitiers who invited me to call on her if I ever got to Paris. So if they light in the town once, well, I may be able to tell you what some of the better class are like. The next time you see Louise, you can tell her that Lieutenant Sands is in camp here, although I suppose she knows it. It is right funny, but I owed Irma a letter from Camp McClellan and wrote her about a month ago. I hope the YMCA doesn't go searching for me when he comes over. How long has she known him, and why does she make up her mind so suddenly? She was just that kind, though. You never could tell Irma. Thank Miss Bertie for her letter, although I suppose she has gone home by now. I'll write to her the first chance I get. We get the New York Herald daily, and everyone waits impatiently after supper for the news. It looks like we have them now on the go. Send and just keep your eye on the annex. How is Billy? Doesn't he and his mother ever come up to you all now? Tell him the lieutenant sends regards. I hope your mother and father are well. Also remember me to Dolly. The guns are firing here really all day, and as I'm writing this, you can hear them and feel the jar and concussion as they are a mile away. Sometimes it's a continuous roar like thunder. Thanks for the letter, and I always enjoy and appreciate these from you. With best regards, from yours as ever, Shep.
Monday night. Dear Shep, this is as far as I got on this epistle night before last, as William had a terrible coughing spell, which made me forget letter writing. You can imagine how excited I was on Monday when the postman announced he had a registered package from France for me. The fabric is awfully attractive and is exactly the same kind of cloth that Dolly and I raved about last fall when we saw the Frenchmen in Washington. They all insist that if I see any Frenchman while I have it on, they know I will be spoken to as a mademoiselle. I shouldn't worry. Margaret Palston's brother, who is in the English army, is on a 3-month furlough. They stopped us on the street yesterday and talked a long time. He has been in the thick of it 2 years and a half. Dolly Polston's beau, who has been in a German prison for over a year, has escaped to England, and Dolly is going over next month to marry him. We were down at the Army and Navy Club Saturday night, and I never saw such a crowd. Should have seen Dolly with her chaperone's armband on, but she insists she's too young to be asking the boys if they want to meet girls so they can dance. Sunday, Dolly and I were very energetic, went to church in the morning, and in the afternoon started out for a walk, as we haven't an electric auto. At Robinson Street, who should we meet but Joe Bruner, who joined us and walked down to the Jefferson. Never saw so few people on the street, and only about 3 in the Jefferson. Can't imagine where everyone was. Saw Pete White, and we paid a regular visit on the street corner. They have moved 3 doors from the corner of Lombardy on Hanover next to James's. Asked about all of you. Yesterday morning, Dolly and I went down to do some shopping, and who should we see in T.A. Miller's but Bill Knowles, Lieutenant. As soon as he saw us, he came rushing out to speak and insisted we come in and have a drink. A lieutenant from Norfolk, who was in Columbia with him, was in there. We had to go down on Main Street, so we took them to the station. The other lieutenant was going home for a day, then they are going out to Fort Sill for special training. Herbert Ragland's picture was in the paper last night. He is home on furlough after being in the war zone nearly a year. Did I tell you last week Miss McLaughlin phoned to see if I would take some sailors sightseeing, so Dolly and I went down about 4:30, and they were waiting for us. They were all 3 from out west, just off the ranch. They were very nice and gentlemanly and seemed to appreciate it as much. I saw in tonight's paper they expected to use the Blues and Gray Armory to house the student corps of the medical college. Last week there was a dance at the Blues Armory for the benefit of the Blues Tobacco Fund. Haven't heard what they made. I sat next to Lucy Tompkins and a lieutenant in church Sunday. She wanted to know why I didn't come down to the C&O and get a job. Believe nearly every girl in town has a job. Lots down at the munition factory at 7 Pines. And I know a good many who are folding circulars for this next Liberty loan and getting $10 a week. Father's going out to the Confederate reunion Saturday, which is to be held at Tulsa, Oklahoma. You remember the little Johnson girl who lives down here in the red brick house at the corner? Oh, I know you haven't forgotten that night. She is going as a sponsor, and a gentleman asked Father if he would look after her. Now, you don't wish you were going. Saw Louise Lorraine at Army and Navy Club Saturday night. She is so fat you would hardly recognize her, and Grace is so thin. Being in love don't agree with her, evidently. Dolly hasn't heard from Temp for over a week. Saw in the paper where his division was in that big drive, and they had advanced a mile. This was up in Belgium, so I guess that is where Temp is, although he doesn't go in the trenches. The paper gave him quite a write-up about his transport being the best he had seen, and he had been through the British camps too. Really, I can't understand why you haven't heard from Richmond, for I hear others have heard. But you see, I am not waiting on ceremony, for I have received 4 letters from you, and this is my 7th. Dolly keeps reminding me how late it's getting, and I know I have told you all the gossip. Dolly sends best regards and says Temp is still looking for you. Bonne nuit, Monsieur. Liz. Here's a motto I saw on the paper, and wish I could live up to it. Keep your face with sunshine lit, laugh a little bit, gloomy shadows oft will flit, if you have the wit and grit, just to laugh a little bit.
Dear Liz, the latest news I've heard from you was a letter of August 10th that came about September 8th, so you see something must be wrong with the mail. There was a big game of ball here this evening after supper between the married and single officers, and the score was 23-21, so you see it was a dandy. This was the first time I played for 7 or 8 years, and I'm feeling stiff already and suppose I'll be sore all over by morning. I received a very pleasant surprise today, day before yesterday, when Michaud walked in and called on me as his regiment was here, and I had been told by an officer he was left at McClellan. He was looking very well except a little thin, and we had a regular family reunion. It seems right funny, but he just missed me at McClellan by a few hours and should have run into me here. He only stayed at McClellan 7 weeks, so didn't meet any of my friends there as he was kept at school nearly all the time. We are gradually getting ready to leave, and I hope it will be soon, but of course no date for our departure has been set. The Camp Lee bunch left last week, but I don't know where they have gone, and the brigade that Michaud is in came to take their place. He has been within 30 miles of us ever since he arrived, and neither one of us knew it. There is still a lot of influenza here, but the situation is improving. There have been 7 deaths in the battalion, but only 2 were Richmond boys, and they were members of my old casual troop, but I don't think you knew either one of them. The war news gets better every day, and if it keeps up this way, we will find ourselves back at home before we know it. How about saving me a month of dates when I get back in honor of the occasion? I certainly would like to see you again, if only for a little while, and one of those nights of which I was so fortunate as to get a large number in days past to consist of a little supper, a show, and then a dance at the Jefferson would seem like heaven itself. I didn't realize at the time when you and I were having those parties how fortunate I was, and when a war gets over in this country, and especially in a camp like this where you rarely see a woman, he begins to realize fully what a real friendship of a girl at home means. Well, is the swing on the porch worked much these days, and have the trees on Grove Avenue or the West Hampton cars any tales to tell? Please write me often. Sincerely yours as ever, Shep. Dear Liz, your letter number 5 dated August 16th has just arrived today, and evidently on one of your letters is either lost or mislaid, as I have only received 3 prior to this one. They were mailed 16 July, 31 July, and 10th August, and arrived here on 10th September, and 2nd September respectively. The influenza has decreased very much, and we hope it is about over, although there are still a few men left. I have escaped it entirely so far and consider myself very fortunate. Our course of instruction is about over, and we expect to leave very soon, and most probably by the time you receive this, I will be at the front, but of course nobody knows where we go from here. I suppose I wrote you about Ashley Peasley being accidentally shot in August. Well, I saw him today, and while his arm is a little stiff, he has the use of it. He is out of the hospital and back with his regiment. Michaud is here in camp and his regiment and comes over quite frequently to see me. He seems very enthusiastic about his work and loves to have a dandy good battery, and he loves to have a dandy good battery. And my friends in Houston and became acquainted with on Pikes Peak and had glorious time with them while there. He arrived in France the day I left and has been about 30 miles from me ever since. It is some consolation to know that while I can't use the moon over here, it is also idle part of the time at home, but child, watch out when I get home, as I have lots of lost time to make up for. And you know me. When the sub was reported, the bunch acted exactly different from what you would have thought, as everyone rushed on deck and climbed up on the rail and life rafts and cheered like it was a football game, and they didn't want to ruin a shot. The English crew was very much surprised that our men wouldn't get excited and realize they might have drowned. The morale of the army is wonderful, and it's hard for one at home to realize the spirit they all leave, and everyone just laughs at anything that comes up and refuses to be worried. The French say they can't understand as we keep in good spirits all the time. After the firing stopped, everyone settled down very much disappointed with the exception of a YMCA worker, a preacher, and the others undressed and went to bed. I slept sounder than ever before, but 2 or 3 stayed on deck all night. The show at the Hippo was a bunch of specialty acts that made sort of a blur, and I enjoyed it very much. They pulled off the same jokes that our comedians do, but were rather crude about it, and I don't think in its present change for the program's about 5 cents, and the ticket sellers and ushers are women. Did Margaret Black marry John Williams? The place we just came from is about equal distance between Paris and Bordeaux, and is just north of Poitiers and short south of Cattle-Rot. Now we are sort north of Vannes and northeast of Saint Nazaire. Of course, there are very few families over here who haven't lost some friend or relative, but compared with the whole country, a very rural part of France has ever been in the hands of Germans. The roads are wonderful, and most of them have long straight stretches and then a slight turn and another stretch. They are kept in splendid condition, and I don't know of any greater pleasure than a motor tour through France after the war. I'll be guide and interpreter if you'll be chauffeur. Comprenez? I don't know what you see in the papers, as I rarely ever see me from home, but I am sure they don't print everything we see or know. The people I lived with at Le Clos treated me mightily nice and seemed to be worried to see me go, but no romance developed, at least on my part. We had lots of fun, though trying to study French and English. The weather has been very disagreeable for the last few weeks, and after sunset, it gets real cold and feels like autumn at home. We have reveille at 5:45, so it's dark then, and my trench coat certainly feels good. For the last week, we have gotten up by moonlight. I heard a few days ago that a bunch of specialists from the university were part of the submania just before they sailed. Wouldn't that kill Joe Brewer if he were one of them? Thanks for the offer, and save me some of your homemade stuff until I get home. I stopped to go to supper, and when I came back, found letter number 6 dated 25th of August here, so you came. See, this is too much excitement for one day, and the joy of it makes me feel like I was absent in heaven. What is Camp Lee being used for now, and how many soldiers are over there? I saw some of the Camp Lee bunch here, and they all seemed very pleased with the way Richmond had treated them. The plan of 7th Street seems pretty good, and the boys are very fortunate to be able to enter someone's home and talk to real nice people, as such a thing is almost unknown with us. However, the Y has some mighty good things going on over here, and there is usually a big time on town Saturday night. I know you must have been surprised to see Lee Lorraine. How was he looking? Doesn't it seem years ago that all the bunch used to sit on the floor in your parlor before the fire and gossip on Saturday nights, and to think how they have scattered? Every time I hear from the farm, Ignatz has done some new stunt, and Mama seems happy and says things are doing fine. They are now building a new barn, and it faces the end of the dwelling house. Give my regards to Jack the chauffeur, and tell him to look me up if he ever hears my division is in the neighborhood. About Grace's engagement. I was surprised and I wasn't, because I should have remembered I had practically been out of Richmond for 2 years, and lots of new and strange things can happen in that time, and I look back and remember some of the letters I used to get at McClellan. They said an awful lot about what Ralph and I have been doing. From what I saw of home, he seems to be an awful nice boy, and I hope she married life and he doesn't meet the fate of so many aviators. Do you recall how I used to kid and wanting to see all of you girl happy married? And have you remembrances came and visit an old retired bachelor at the farm? About your remark at the train, I think it must have gone over my head. Sure enough, as much as said in such a short time, but I don't recall it. The Killies certainly were nice to me, and I got a long letter from Kitty a few days ago telling all the local gossip and wanting me back for a visit, to see the new house and burn some of the big logs for Christmas. Mother and I became great friends, and she is great on the soft stuff, and she said she was going to hang out a service flag for me. Oh boy, this is some war. I wrote the temp over a month ago and have never heard from him. I have a terrible secret to tell. I am getting fat and let my Sam Brown belt out to the last notch. Michaud has Billy Ward for a special instructor, and he considers him the best he ever saw. I have seen Billy several times and chatted with him. Water is neither plentiful nor popular here and is used mostly as an excuse for building bridges. Sabe? More when I see you. Sure wish you and I could go for another horseback ride and hope we can do before long. Everyone here is hopeful but not carried off their feet by the recent increases, but I think this time next year we will see it all over except the shooting. Have you heard the new slogan of the Americans? Heaven, Hell, or Hoboken by Christmas. You have asked what the French girls look like, so I'm enclosing a picture of me taken with Le Gauger Orient, property of Helen Williams, and another officer I don't know, but I can't tell what condition his heart is in. The two girls are sisters, and the one in black was married last May, and her husband, a captain, was killed by gas last week. These snaps were taken at a Sunday afternoon party in Clo early in August. Your letters were greatly appreciated and enjoyed, and please write, whenever you can. Don't do anything rash like getting engaged, because if all the girls we left behind are going to do that and marry the men over there, we would love to bring the French ones home with us in self-defense. Yours as ever, Shep.
Friday night. I wonder what's keeping the boys. Here it is, 8 o'clock, and we have had supper and are still waiting. I bet they are around at the armory making final arrangements for that track meet. Grace, what are you going to wear tomorrow night? Let's don't doll all up in an evening dress. Isn't that mean to bring back such sweet memories, Shep? But being down here tonight does make me think about the good times long ago. But there will be plenty more after the war, and from all the good news we have been hearing lately, it might not be so terribly far off. This is the last night of the membership campaign, and the men have just finished supper and have gone out to try and get 75 more members before 9 o'clock. There were about 75 men here tonight, but not a soldier, so I didn't flirt. I couldn't help from thinking most of them were slackers, although they might have good excuses. Grace and I are here in the dining room waiting. There's an unwelcome visitor who keeps interrupting my progress, a little mouse, which appears every few minutes, and you know how I like them. I am playing safety first, and I'm sitting on my feet. You never know. I'll never grow up. What do you know? I wrote you William Jr. had the whooping cough. Well, the other day I developed a cold, and it didn't seem to get any better. So I went to see Dr. Carrington, and he says he fears I am going to have whooping cough. Now, can you beat it? To play safety first, I went down and was inoculated and took my second dose this morning. Without thinking, I punctured in my left arm, and, being left-handed made it terribly so this morning. I tried my right arm, so tonight I feel like a wounded soldier. I got 2 of your letters last Saturday, the 6th and the 5th, and surely enjoyed hearing all the news. And be sure and save that diary so we can read all those things you can't write now. My, but you ought to be glad you aren't over here. The camps are full of Spanish influenza. I was dumbfounded this morning when I saw the account of Glenn McLaughlin's death from influenza. He was at the training camp at Lee, had just come down last week from Fort Myer. There, Jimmy Drake's picture was in the paper as having died in France after being gassed. Hate to write you any sad news, but knew it would interest you. You would have laughed if you had seen Dolly yesterday morning when I received a letter from Camp Lee. The boy said he'd been in quarantine for influenza. You would have thought smallpox, for she made me take the letter out on the porch to read it. I know Lieutenant, who is somewhere over there, who sure had a write-up in last night's paper. Yes, and he had on his overseas cap, too. If I can find the paper, I will send you the clipping. Gee, I know you were glad to see that old bunch from the Blues. It was a regular reunion. Dolly thinks Temp is in northern Belgium. That is where his division is. He wrote he was hoping to run across you soon, so Dolly wrote him exactly where you were. He is right at the front now and says he is glad to say they haven't any speed limit over there. You know he is in the transport section. You were asking about Bill. I heard he was at Camp Sevier in Greenville, but I never see or hear from him anymore. Minnie said she saw him in town last week. Speaking of Bobby, I heard he fell for some girl visiting Dorothy, and they decided to trade beaux. Lucy Tompkins doesn't seem to worry. Every time I see her, she has another lieutenant. We have been like ladies of leisure all week, for we didn't have to cook dinners. Father left last Saturday for Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the reunion is held this year. This last draft is surely catching a bunch, even Alan Gregory and Oscar Nabel. They are still lots of young boys in civilian clothes, and I don't see how they have gotten by. What do you know, the teams just presented us with 3 boxes of candy. Now, if I hadn't written such a fat letter, I might send you a few pieces. Sure enough, though I would like to send sometime, but they won't let us, so that's the reason why. They are having speech making, so if this sounds foolish, don't blame me. Am awfully glad to hear you have at last gotten some of my letters, for as I said before, a mere solitaire wouldn't keep me from writing to you, and all of my friends, but I think they are too extravagant in war times. Best regards, from Elizabeth.
Dear Liz, your very welcome and newsy letter of 9th September arrived yesterday, so you see it took just 23 days. We are still here in Mochon, and the quarantine has been lifted, and the boys are fast getting well. It is hoped to get away from here very soon, but nobody really knows when. I am certainly anxious to leave, though, and to get to the front, because a few more weeks for the Allies like the last one, and we'll be all over for the Germans. As the French say, Bulgarie finie. This is sure one world of surprises, and I got mine this morning. The colonel sent for me and calmly informed me that I was to be assigned to Company G. Can you beat it? It is agreeable to me because while it doesn't mean anything right now, it puts me in line for something that may happen before too long. That company has sure had some changes since Christmas, as they have lost 7 officers. The captain was transferred to cavalry last week, and George Parsons went to aviation, so Jim Buck was put in command, and I was assigned to fill the other vacancy. You will be the first one at home to learn the news. Isn't it funny how things turn out? Michaud is just a mile away, and I usually see him about 3 or 4 times a week. From the newspaper accounts, it would seem that Temp's division was in action with the British near Quinton, and also that mine is in action in the American sector where fighting was last week. Last week's paper said there was a bill in Congress to increase the pay of all officers about $500 a year. Wouldn't it be a shame to take the money? I'm enclosing a list of letters sent and received from you so you can check up and see if I've missed one. It seems funny how the mail runs, as it has been only once since I arrived here that my letters to you have been farther than 10 days apart. I certainly did enjoy seeing Miss Peasley at Camp Mills, and she sent my tent her headquarters. She made my tent her headquarters. I am glad you liked the pictures, and you can reciprocate the next time you have any taken. All officers have to have a photograph taken without a hat for identification purposes, and the other one I was posed by the photographer, and I've since seen hundreds just like it in the same position, so it must be a national custom. Therefore, the reason temps were like mine. I really think I'm getting fatter than ever. I bought a piece of heavy serge last week for a uniform, but there is severe talk of changing the present style, so I think I'll wait a while. No doubt little Mac was delightful to hear of Dave's return home to train the new ones, but I don't want to come back until I have a gold stripe and have seen service at the front. But after that, if they order me back to some nice place like Petersburg or Camp McClellan, well, I'm a good soldier and will always obey orders. Remember me to William Jr. and tell him I think it was real mean in you to give him whooping cough. He must be awfully attractive by now. I hope you have received your cap by now, as I've inquired at the post office at Clos a short time ago, and it has not been returned to them. The French name for them is bonnet de police. I am glad you like the idea and hope you enjoy wearing it. I have one favor to ask. Please wear it to IA's and go to the bar and put your foot on the rail and drink a Coke for me. Where did you get that chaperone stuff for Dolly and Mary McGarry? What do you want to do? Make me laugh myself to death? Last Saturday I went to Vaughan and in a photographic gallery saw a girl who was so much like you it was spooky. But on the first sight, but I saw later she was not near as good looking as you. Another funny thing, I sent you a pair of wooden shoes last Saturday, but these were Breton type. Wooden shoes are used in every part of France I've seen yet. Thanks for the papers and magazines you sent, and no matters how old they are always welcome. I hope to get there soon. There must have been some building near you, as I censored a letter today addressed to 3301 Grove. We officers censor our own mail, only subject to the base censor, and no incoming mail to us is opened. It's rich the stuff we see sometimes, but you should be perfectly safe in writing me anything and soft and sturdy as you want to. I received a letter from Mama yesterday, and it seems she is crazy about Ignatz as ever. And he has a trick now coming up and trying to kiss her when he wants apples. The new barn is about finished, and all the cattle are doing fine, and there are lots of new pigs. Billy Ward came down to see me a few days ago, and we had a long talk of old things. He is looking fine and well, but you can tell Catherine I know a certain first lieutenant of artillery who would like to see Forest Hill awfully bad once more. The city of Vaughan is nearby, is very old, and I certainly wish you were over here to take a stroll around it and see some of the queer buildings. There is a wonderful church which I was in last week, and certain street is so narrow the eaves of the houses within a yard of connecting to each other. I heard from Grace a few days ago and was greatly surprised to know that at last they had moved. She wrote me while at Nils. She told me about the big news, but I didn't receive it until I got over here. Best regards to all at home, and hope they are well. Many thanks for your letter, and please write often. Yours as ever, Shep. P.S. Have you heard anything from Irma Lewis?
Wednesday night. Dear Shep, I wrote you last Friday night, and the next morning I received your 7th letter, which was sent from there September 13th, and got here on the 28th. That wasn't bad, 15 days. Well, life goes on here about the same too. I am still playing nurse, and William is still whooping, but we are in hopes this is his last week, for he surely has had a time. I have taken 3 inoculations, and my 4th tomorrow, and I really think it is doing good, for I haven't started whooping. While speaking of unpleasant things, the influenza is so bad they expect to close all schools, theaters, and churches. Just before supper tonight, Louisa Moore phoned the doctor and had been to see Minto and says she has it. Mother is worried to death, as Minnie went to Tate Springs Monday with Mrs. Lumsden, and no one is there with the children but the servant. Mr. Ernest Moore brought Minnie, so she will be here by tomorrow afternoon. From the account of the gas mask, you are also having troubles of your own, yes? It must be very invigorating. Didn't it feel like old times seeing so many of the old boys? Guess Denny Wright got lots of experience at Hopewell, too. Do you see much drinking, or is that wine strong enough to take effect? A friend of Uncle Al's brought him a jug of apple cider yesterday, but we haven't tried it yet. Doesn't it sound like way back in the country? No, Rosalie will be delighted to meet your brother, and I'm going to write Cousin Annie for her address, as I haven't it, but no, she is at the naval base. We have been wanting to go up to see your mother for a long time, but with William sick, and Dolly and I couldn't leave Mother at the same time. I told Mrs. Peasley I would take her when we went. No, our pipe dreams of New York didn't come true, for we couldn't get a servant, so wouldn't leave Mother to keep house. Miss Betty Lewis wants me to come up and visit her the last of this month, but I don't think there's a chance, although Mother and Dolly think it terrible. I won't go, but I don't like to leave all the housekeeping for Dolly to do. Speaking of getting married and coming back with a gold stripe, come on, confess up to an old pal. Is she the widow or a little Parisienne? Sunday night. I was very rudely interrupted by William coughing, and didn't finish this, as you see. I put it in my writing paper box and really forgot I hadn't finished it. And wasn't that a nice place to stop? I don't think just where I was asking an important question. Dang it all, if this epidemic of flu isn't soon over, I don't know what I'll do. Every day I hear someone else has it. Minnie got home Friday morning and found Minto very ill, but she is out of danger now and better. But brother, the next to the youngest, was taken with it this morning and tonight has a fever of 104. Think Minto caught it going to a benefit dance with a soldier, and as Louise expressed it, dancing cheek to cheek. You know that's the new style. Some class. Dolly and I went yesterday afternoon to see Maud Adams in A Kiss for Cinderella. It was perfectly fine, and she is so attractive. You would have laughed if you had seen the people looking around if they heard the slightest cough. Starting today, the churches, theaters, and schools are to be closed, so the only thing we have to do is to ride out in the fresh air. Sounds exciting, and why not on Sundays? State Fair opens tomorrow, but it doesn't thrill me a bit. Might ride over to see the fireworks that night, like we used to do. Remember when you all were at Camp Stewart and Temp was on guard and we went over to see him? Saw in the paper where the 30th Division, which is Temp's, was in that big drive which gained from Arras to La Fère, which was 50 miles. Dolly hasn't heard for over a week, so is terribly worried. I'm going to be certain this time this letter is sealed and mailed. I gave William your message, and he said to tell the lieutenant hi. Bonne nuit, Elliot.
Dear Liz, your letter number 7 of September 16th arrived at retreat tonight, and as usual was greatly enjoyed and appreciated. I am glad to hear the cap arrived and hope it came in good condition and was up to what you had expected and that you get lots of pleasure out of it. I'll bet it's the first one seen in Richmond. In this game, a man never can tell what tomorrow will bring or to when another chance will come, so it doesn't pay to let an opportunity slip by. All of which leads up to the following while in Vaughan last Saturday, I brought you a Christmas present. Please don't laugh at me and the way the mail runs. I suppose you receive it in time. I was afraid to trust anything valuable like a solitaire or a diamond necklace to the mail on account of the subs, so I sent you a lace collar. It is handmade Brittany stuff and very handsome. I know it is handsome because the girl who sold it to me said so. All kidding aside, it is really a very nice piece of lace, and I'm sure you can match it up and make something pretty out of it. Have it ready for our first party when I get home about February the 1st of 1919. This was news, certainly good, looks good, and I'm afraid it is going to end before I get to the front. I wouldn't be in the least surprised to see it end in a few months and then back to the old USA for me on the first boat. We are still here, but expect to leave inside of 2 weeks as our training is over and we are just awaiting orders to move. Michaud is still here, and I'm sure to leave before he does. I am back in G Company now and hard at work all day, with such little things as 100 or so letters to censor between time. Some of them are very funny and some very affectionate, and it's so often I've read Dearest and My Darling, Sweetest Little Girl in the World and Loved One, that I have to stop and think when I start a letter for myself, lest I use the wrong term. You will forgive me if I should make such a horrible mistake, wouldn't you? I am sorry to hear William has been so sick, and sincerely hope he is entirely well by now. Please tell him the lieutenant sends a big kiss, which you may deliver. Compris? The people at home are surely doing a wonderful work in entertaining the boys at weekend parties, and the good work should be kept up. You can't imagine what it means to a lonesome man to have the privilege of going to a well-refined home and meeting the people there, and I'd give most anything to have the pleasure of spending an afternoon talking to a real American girl once more in her parlor as for spending an evening with you. Why would that be too much like heaven to be dreamed of? I'd sure like to see Dolly at the A&N Club as a chaperone. Dr. Macklin wrote me a long letter a few days ago telling me about the auto rides on Saturday afternoons for the men in service. I am glad to hear you are helping them out. I thought Joe Brewer had been sent overseas with Dick Walsh. Give my regards to Pete and Wicks if you see them again. I remember well that night about 10 years ago when I saw the little Johnson girl tell her beloved good night. And I suppose your father will have his hands full chaperoning such a popular young lady. However, I don't suppose there will be much excitement this time since the 18 to 45 draft has gone into effect. These old vets have better leave their final big reunion before we come back because we have far better line of war stories than they could ever tell. I wrote to Temp soon after arriving over here, but never have heard from him, but expect to write again very soon. Many thanks for not waiting on ceremony to answer my letters, and hope the good work keeps up and you write real often. The little poem you sent ending, just to laugh a little bit, is a dandy, and I think it was the motto of the American Army, as I've seen them over here all the way from working parties in the rain to a trainload of wounded homeward bound, unfit for further service, and with every one it was a smile and give 'em hell for us boys. The spirits of the men keep up wonderfully, and the only time they get blue is when the mail doesn't come. Nobody seems to consider himself a hero or regrets he came, and all want to stay to finish the job once and for all. If you want a real good laugh, the next time you are downtown, buy a little book of letters entitled Dear Mabel by a rookie in the New York division. It is a scream and true to Army life. I am enclosing a cartoon which gives some idea of our struggles with French money. You mentioned Grace being so fat because she is in love, but failed to state whether you are gaining or losing flesh. Come on now, fess up. Compris? I don't know if it gets by the censor, but I am enclosing another honor of war. Best regards to all the family and yourself. Believe me, as always, Shep.
Sunday night. Tell me, Shep, what's a person going to write about when the town is full of the flu and everyone is afraid of everyone else? All the churches, theaters, schools, soda fountains are closed, and all public meetings, dancing, and anything that collects a crowd. The John Marshall High School has been turned into a hospital, and tomorrow they expect to turn 2 more schools into hospitals. Gee, I hate to tell you everything morbid, but knew you would be interested to know how everything was. They say they have the disease under control, but there are 360 new cases reported yesterday. I believe they have it in nearly every family in Richmond. Thank goodness we haven't it out here, but Uncle Al just escaped by taking quinine in time. Then Father came home last Monday sick and had the doctor, but they are now both out now. You know we are frightened when Dolly and I haven't been downtown for over a week. Fresh air for me. Minto and Brother are better, but Minnie has it now, and their servant, so Louisa and Dolly Collins are the only well ones. Speaking of brighter things, felt like screaming this morning when I read the headlines. German government accepts terms imposed by president. Feel like there's a catch somewhere. Friday's paper said the Kaiser had abdicated his throne. They are having quite a discussion here now. Uncle Al thinks arms will be laid down within 10 days. But I would never trust the Germans. They would have to show me. Guess that's the president's sentiments, too. Dolly's already thinking of going over, for she said she knows the engineers will be kept over there to help rebuild. Think she's going to begin packing tomorrow, so look out for her. Temp wrote in his last letter he had just received a letter from you, but that you were far away from him. He was in Belgium, but had moved, and was then in a rest camp. While at the front, he had to go over one of the worst shelled roads. He rides horseback all the time, and a piece of shrapnel cut a piece off his horse's ear off. And it didn't hit him. Then he saw a piece of road blown up that he had passed over 30 seconds before. It makes you shiver to think of it. Saw in today's paper, Mr. James had been made mayor. Won't he have a swell head? You remember Quarles in Troop B? He was at an aviation field in Michigan, and he and another lieutenant went out canoeing one afternoon and didn't return. They searched and found the canoe, but never have found their bodies, although they have been given up as drowned. Mr. William H. Sands died this morning of pneumonia, and Arthur Cardwell's wife died Wednesday of pneumonia and left an infant and a little girl, 5 years old. Bess wrote to give her best regards to you. She said she was walking down Penn Avenue, and who did she walk into but Santori? He looked so glad to see someone from Richmond and was up there to see whether he goes to war or back to school. Wonder which he drew. They had stopped the men from coming over from Camp Lee, but believe me, a plenty of sailor came in Saturday morning. We were in the machine on Main Street in front of Father's office, and it looked like the whole Navy coming up from the depot. Told Dolly to put her handkerchief up to her face, that the germs were just coming. Think it is terrible they are allowed to come in town now that the flu is so bad. Uncle Al says tell you he and his partner sold that tract of land in the neighborhood of your farm for more than twice what they paid for it, which will indicate property in the section is increasing in value. By the way, I am knitting you a pair of socks for Christmas, but don't know how I will get them over, as only the immediate family is allowed to send one package. Oh, but maybe you will be back by then. Yes? Well, so long for this time from Liz.
Dear Liz, well, this has been a most beautiful afternoon, and the sun set behind a glorious bank of red. The air has been just a little crisp, and I thought how I would have taken a walk along the boulevard or out along the Beltline with you. It seems like 10 or 20 years ago since I had that pleasure, and since then life has been just one thing after the other in the same monotonous way. From the news that has just come, it looks as if we might be home sooner than we expected. But if it closes before I get to the front and get in action, I certainly will be sore and disappointed. Just think of it, over 2 years in the service, and get left out of the biggest show the world has ever seen, and men who came in a year later have been in the midst of it. Isn't it enough to make a man sick? Temp was sure nearby, as the papers say his division was in action and made quite a record for themselves. I have just come back from supper and am sitting in my room all nice and cozy by the side of a stove, but it is quite chilly outside. After I go to bed, the fire goes out, and besides, I open the window, and about 5 a.m. it gets quite chilly. This morning I awoke from the cold, and I had 2 heavy blankets and coat over me. When I am sitting at my window, I can look out and see the most perfect half moon I ever gazed upon. Is it shining tonight through the trees out on Grove Avenue? How are the football games at Richmond this year, and have you been to many? Of course, our course of training is finished, and we are merely awaiting transportation to leave, and I'm sure it's straight to the front when we do go. I had a new experience this morning as I was detailed to defend 3 prisoners before a general court-martial. Can you think of me as a lawyer? I haven't heard the verdict yet, but I hope they don't get over 25 years. The instructors say our brigade is as good as any that's been here and beat all of them in some ways. How about the National Guard now? Hope Billy is over the whooping cough now. Best regards. Sincerely, Shep. Dear Liz, your long newsy letter of 29th September, number 7, arrived today and was waiting for me when I went to dinner. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and this is about the best time yet of any of your letters have been made. Our training is over, and all of our wagons and such are at the station waiting to be loaded when the cars go west probably in a few days, and we'll be on our way somewhere, and I hope it's to the front. From the way things are now, I wouldn't be surprised to see it end most any time, and I sure would hate to miss all the fun after being in the Army so long. The reports say our brigade was equal to any and better in a great many ways than any other one that's been here. I censor so many letters written on Y paper that it looked real funny to get one written on it. The Y is doing a great work over here, and too much cannot be said in its praise, and many a lonesome boy is cheered up by its many activities. It was a real cute beginning you had to your letter, and it surely reminded me of the old days and how all of us used to scrap about whose fault it was when someone had to wait. It's hard to believe, but it's been nearly 3 years since we had one of us little after supper lyric parties, and while we were going, we certainly did enjoy them as well as the track meets. The end of your letter sounds funny, where you refer to that solitaire. Are the arrangements completed for you to receive one as soon as the war closes? If all you girls are going to do that stunt, while I'll be a complete stranger at home and have to bring back a French girl in self-defense. When the new draft goes into effect, I suppose it will hit the YMCA a hard blow. Tell me everything. Are any of the Julian family in the service? If not, how do they keep out? I thought you were big and old enough now to not catch the whooping cough or be afraid of rats and mice. I had a pet mouse at McClellan last year, and he would come out at night and sit on the other side of the room and wink at me. I know how it feels to be inoculated, and as I think they have filled me with every kind of germ there is. Many thanks for the news, because the papers are so irregular it's hard to keep up from the letters we get. I felt sure Jimmy Drake would get his sooner or later. Mama writes me real often, and things are going fine up there, and all the pigs and stork are well. It seems Ignatz has become the family pet and does to suit himself, so I suppose I'll have a new war on my hands when I try to ride him on my return. I suppose you saw in the papers how Temp's division received special orientation from the British general they were serving under. Bobby Parsons is doing well enough, although I think there is a spark of revenge still burning in his heart, and someone better look out when both are out of the service. He is enjoying life and has a very exciting correspondence going on now with an American girl. Have you heard the latest saying of the American Expeditionary Forces? Mother, take down the service flag. Your boy is still in the States. It is awfully nice of the teams to give you the candy, and many thanks for the offer, even though you couldn't find any. Hope you received the lace collar in good condition. How are the football games this year? Liz, I expect to be home before this time next year, and I hope things will be so that you and I can take our little parties as in the old days. We surely enjoyed those times, and just think what a reunion we will have. Please write me every chance you get. As ever, Shep.
Sunday. Dear Shep, to think this is the first Sunday we have been able to use the machine, and it had to go in rain. We had planned to go out to see your mother and Ignaz, but then go to the mill, but maybe it won't be raining next Sunday. Well, we were flushed with mail yesterday morning. I got 2 letters from you, the 9th and the 10th. Then I got a letter from Camp Lee, and Dolly got 2 letters from Temp, so we were kept busy all morning. It only took 14 days for your 10th letter to get here. I haven't received your 8th letter. Now, what did you write that the censor wouldn't pass? I think the influenza has abated a little, although it has been perfectly awful. Time seems to fly so fast, yet there isn't a thing to do but to stay at home and knit. I was down at Grace's last week helping with her trousseau. Think it is going to be sometime soon. Grace was out here the other night, and she, Dolly, and I were sitting by the parlor fire sewing. And first Dolly would say something about Temp, then Grace would say something about Ralph, until it got to be a joke. I told them I appreciated them entertaining me, but I thought they might ask me about some of my friends. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So, they were talking some. You and Walter Kilby sure did progress rapidly, but how about Kitty? Why, of course she just wants you to come to see the new house and the log fires. Aren't they cozy? Then your prophecy might come true, except the bachelor part. But Kitty won't mind having a few of your friends sometime, I know. Tell me, why don't you want me to become engaged like all are doing now? Now, if you have picked out a nice, attractive Frenchman and think we will reciprocate, that will be fine. I might consider waiting to give him the once-over. You are mistaken about all the girls being married, for there are just lots of single ones still over here. Regina, Elizabeth Watkins, Kitty and Louise, and just lots of others. Let's talk a little sense for a while. The Fourth Liberty loan closed last night with over $6 billion received being subscribed. Richmond and Virginia went 25% over the allotment. Isn't that grand? Know you were delighted to find Michaud so near. Are his men from Texas? It was Henry Bruner who was up at the university. Joe is still making money, so I hear. Pete White is ill with pneumonia, and Wicks and the baby have influenza. We phoned, and Mrs. White said Pete was holding his own, and the others were a little better. Got an awfully nice letter from Compton the other day. I heard from him at McClellan, but this is the first from over there. Now don't tell me you are letting the moon go to waste with good-looking girls over there like the one in the picture. We had pretty nice-looking moons, over here on Saturdays and Sunday until the flu started, but alas. You were asking about Camp Lee? It is the replacement camp. Then the officers' infantry training camp is there. I haven't any idea how many are there, but as soon as any leave, some more are sent over. I had an engagement with a will-be officer this weekend, but they are in quarantine, so I was mighty glad as I am scared to death about the flu. Saw Dave Bruner on the street the other afternoon, and he came up and talked a long time. He had just gotten over the flu. He is second lieutenant in the aviation and is stationed at Langley Field. I was awfully glad to hear the good news and feel puffed up to think that I am the first to hear. Didn't understand whether you had already been made captain or adjutant. You'd better not be telling it around what a J. Pierpont you are getting to be. Someone might give you the tip to Uncle Sam. Gee, but that auto trip sounds so good to me, for I always did dream of traveling abroad. Since you are to be guide, you will have to sit in the front, and we will put the other two in the back. They surely won't be jealous of two old friends. What in the world will you want with a new uniform over there, when you are going to the front? Or are you allowed to visit around? Guess I'm stupid, but I can't think who you were referring to as Little Mac and Dave. Can't recall anyone but Fergus, who has been sent back to train. That's right. Always obey, even if you are sent to Texas. You were asking if I received the cap. And positive I wrote you before it came, then afterwards telling you how well it becomed me. Am excited to death over having a pair of wooden shoes. Temps haven't come yet, so I guess he is keeping them to bring with him. Surely appreciate the things you have sent me. Why in the world didn't you get a picture of that girl who looked like me? Would surely like to see her, for I thought my pattern was lost. Am sending you 2 magazines. In Harper's there's a story written by Miss Lewis, Irma's sister. It is pretty good. Child, I feel like a perfect lady again. We have a cook and surely hope she will stay. Think I have had all the training I need for a while. Forgot to tell you about Temp and can't write much in this space. He is 3 miles from the front, sleeping in a hole, with 2 pieces of tin over it for a roof, which is fine except when it rains. His letters were most thrilling, so we'll tell you about them in my next. Said he was going to write you that night. Votre bonne sœur, Liz. Dear Shep, have just gotten your 8th letter, dated the 19th of September. Some class the way the mail travels. The letter of August the 10th you spoke of receiving must have been the one delayed, as it wasn't on the slip you sent me in your 10th letter. That must have been some ball game. Did you look like a veteran time you had finished? It is dandy you all have time for a little recreation, for you know the old saying, all work and no play. You surely were lucky to meet Michaud after just missing him at McClellan. Dolly and I went downtown shopping yesterday afternoon and came back by Grace's to get some work to take home and so on. She greeted me with the sad news that the wedding had to be postponed indefinitely, as the influenza has put a ban on all furloughs, so Ralph won't be able to get a leave any time soon. Then he doesn't know when he will be going over. Please don't mention that I said anything to you about it, for it hadn't been announced in the papers, and she has only told Ruby, Miss Chandler, Dolly, and me about the wedding. When we got home, found Bessie here. She'd gotten frightened about so many cases of flu in her building, and decided she preferred to be sick at home. Hope she won't, though, for she looks real well, although thin. No wonder the 8th letter was so long coming. Guess it took too long to censor all that foolishness. Remember that old song, You Never Miss the Sunshine Till the Shadow Falls? We'll have to move along, for I've just gotten a phone message from Grace to walk downtown. It is a perfect fall day, and everything looks so pretty and bright. Wish the movies were open once again. Well, so long, Eliz. Monday. Dear Shep, thought I was going to get a lot of letters written last night, but after a long auto ride and a tramp over the fields, believe me, I was ready to hit the hay early. Yes, we got out to the farm. Uncle Al wanted to go by the mill, so Father, Uncle Al, Dolly, William, and I went out. Would have asked Mrs. Peasley to go, but thought Mother was going until the last minute. As we were driving up to the house, met Mrs. Sheppard, going over to see her sister. When we got up to the drawbars, the first thing to greet us was Ignaz. He looked fine and seemed as gentle as a lamb. Don't see why he cuts up so when you ride him. I'll try anything once, so if you hear of a wounded soldier over here, you'll know why. Had an awfully nice time. Saw your mother, father, and Marion. The horses, cows, pigs, and chickens didn't miss a thing. First, we went down to see the pigs, which looked fine. Didn't take any pictures this time. You would have screamed to have seen William, excited to death. Mrs. Crump put him on the horse and rode him around a little, and then he had a ride on the calf. Went over to the spring, and hadn't changed a bit. Couldn't find any watermelons, but plenty of pumpkins. You can give us all a Halloween party next year. Wouldn't it be fun? There are 2 cute little calves. One your father named Grace, but it's a typical blonde. Your mother seems to enjoy it, although it is quite a responsibility. I think it is wonderful how well she has managed. Was saying she had planned the building of the barn, and it is certainly arranged well. She's a regular farmerette. Your mother invited us up, and your father said he would meet us at the train and not make us walk all that long way. I told him he didn't know us. We had walked it before. Also informed me he would put me to work gathering corn, but knew I wouldn't last 20 minutes. What do you know about that? Don't think city girls can do a thing? Billy had a grand time picking hickory nuts. Oh, the wooden shoes came the day after I wrote you last. They surely are cute, but I can't imagine people wearing those kind of shoes all the time. Don't guess they walk much. Many, many thanks for thinking of me in these war times. Forgot to put 10 on the last letter I wrote you on the 22nd. Dolly hasn't heard from Temp since the 2 she got the day I received your 2. Did I write you Bess got frightened at the flu and came running home? She has been at Minnie's nursing her ever since the day after she came. Saw Major James's wife on the street Saturday and said she hadn't heard a thing from France since October the 5th. So guess you all were at the front. I announced yesterday I would like to go over in canteen work, and I wish you could have seen the look on Mother's face. The paper said they were needed so badly, and I just got crazy to get out and do something. Am afraid to take any more soldiers and sailors riding while the flu is raging. Conditions are much better, but the churches, theaters, and all are still closed. Aren't the children getting a holiday? Special notice, please. As I told you, I have knitted a pair of socks and thought, of course, I would send them, but I find I have to have an order from you. So send me one as soon as you get this for the socks and something else you would like, cake, candy, or anything that will keep. Today's the beginning of the War Savings Campaign, and Camp Lee Band is going to play at Capitol Square this afternoon. Little excitement, so guess we will go down. Am excited to death to hear where you all are and what thrills you have had and what you have seen. Just the same, Eliz.
Dear Liz, I haven't heard from you in over a week, but suppose it is because there is a tie-up in the mail somewhere. Things are going on the same here as usual, and it's still raining, but I am well and there is very little sickness here at all. Target practice is going on about half a mile away, and every time they fire, it shakes the desk I'm writing on. All our trunks and barrack bags have been shipped as a detachment left with them yesterday on a trip overland with trucks, so I think we are sure to leave in a few days. There was a brigade field day held yesterday, Sunday, and Company G. I won first prize of 500 francs, nearly $90. They took first place in gas drill, second in infantry drill, and first calisthenics, and several other places in other contests. Our brigade has made a splendid record here, and I'm enclosing a copy of an order issued by the camp commander so you can get some idea of what is thought of us. If I wrote that kind of a record, some of the others not National Guard, either left you, would think I was merely knocking. There has been another shift for me, and I am now acting adjutant for the Horse Battalion. But don't think it means a promotion right now, but there have been a lot of changes here, and you never can tell. The permanent position of adjutant ranks as captain. As October is drawing to a close, it recalled to me the last Halloween party our little crowd ever had before this cruel war came, and how I would like to be back for another one this year. Do you recall the bunch of 10 who stayed over, and what a glorious day it was on November 1st, and how pretty all the trees were, and the long walk we took to Glen Allen, and back up the railroad and through the woods? As I remember, there were 21 up, and the dance and I suppose now they are scattered all over the world. Well, even if I am shut off from other such things, I hope to get an invite to a big party and have a glorious time with one proviso. Don't fall in love. I saw Billy Ward a few nights ago, and he is now captain, and told one that Charlie is first lieutenant. With all these promotions going over, just watch me, and I'll come out of this war yet a colonel. Hope all the family are well, and remember me to Dolly and your father and mother. With best regards, yours as ever, Shep. Your letter number 8, September 7, arrived 2 days ago, just about an hour after I had written you, and just as I was preparing to answer it this morning, number 9 came. Consequently, I'm overcome with so much joy and good luck. We are still tied up here waiting for cars to arrive with the war drawing to a close. It's getting on everyone's nerves as we are close to see action. When I get back home, I'd make a fine president of the Waiters Union, as it seems. I've spent all my military career waiting to move somewhere. The weather continues to change daily, rain one day and sunshine the other. The Y has something for the boys ready every night, so that does a lot to relieve the intrusion, and besides, there are football games nearly every day. Yesterday, our team were from one of the artillery regiments, 7-2. It was a dandy close game, and we didn't score until the fourth quarter. It reminded me of the old days, and I surely wish you could have been with me and helped me root. Sometimes I often wonder if the time is ever coming again when I'll be back in Richmond and we can have some more of those good old times we used to. By the way, this is Halloween. How would you like to be up at the farm for another little party? Well, maybe we can have one next year and make it a reunion. How do you like the idea? I hope William is entirely recovered from his spell, and also you and the family are well. Tell Miss Moore I am sorry she is having so much trouble and hope it will be soon as well. About the amount of drinking, I'll tell you when I get back, but anyone who thinks the French wines haven't got a kick is sadly mistaken. I've seen the effects. I hope Rosalie meets Burnley, as I know he will enjoy knowing her, and I wrote him to look her up. I hope you get up to having, as she'll be glad to both of you and Miss Peasley. It's tough luck that you missed New York, but maybe you will get the chance. Après la guerre finie. I hope you get to see Miss Betty, and if you do, please give her my regards, and thank her for the letter she sent me. What has been of Irving since she took the fatal step? I am anxious to get my gold stripe before I come back, but as for the French girl, well, you remember when I was at home in February, and we might, while standing on your steps, I told you what a high place you held in my opinions, and how I appreciated and value your friendship. Since seeing the others, I think more than ever of you. The new style of dancing sounds exciting, and I don't exactly get the idea of what could be added, as great many of the extreme ones I have seen, you couldn't get a sheet of tissue paper between them. Maybe I'll be an old fogey when I get back. The French people have cut out all dancing until after the war is finished. Speaking of the State Fair, I'll remember those happy days at Camp Stewart and how we used to enjoy your visits out there. I still have at home some of the snapshots I took of those little parties. By the way, don't you believe in fair exchange? I've sent you 2 of my pictures since coming over. Now won't you send me one of yours? Did I write to you now we have a chaplain? He's a real Irishman and priest, and seems to be a splendid man, and everybody is fast getting attached to him. A few days ago, when all of us were joking, I asked him if he promised to make no distinction up at the front and help me go out if I needed him the same as he would a good Catholic. The influenza is surely bad, but I don't think there is cause for great alarm, as it always runs its course and then seems to die out. I haven't heard from home recently, so hope none of them get it. The war news seems to get better every day, but I don't think they will stop fighting for some months yet, and have no hope whatever of getting back home before the end of next summer. Remember that now and see how near correct I am. The general idea seems to be the engineers will not be the first to leave, so probably Dolly has the right idea, and the trip will be a dandy one after the war. By the way, how about coming with her, and be sure and bring your birth certificate? The French laws require it, as I have a leave coming to me soon. And how would you like to spend a honeymoon at Monte Carlo or Nice? Carefree. I am probably 300 miles from Temp, and I extremely do envy him the chance he has had to be in action. The men of G Company spent the 500 francs they won Sunday for a chicken supper tonight, and invited all the officers. I have just come back, and it was a dandy, and the mess hall was decorated with holly and pine and looked like a real holiday scene. I brought back a piece of the holly, which I am enclosing so you can see what it looks like. I think it's different from ours. Being promoted doesn't seem to affect Major James. I wrote you I am now acting as his adjutant. I am glad your Uncle Al came out so well on this land deal near Glen Allen, but hope the county authorities don't raise my taxes on account of the increased value in the neighborhood. Is anything doing but beyond the belt line? You remember I have some land out on Grove Street. Have the belt line tracks ever been finished? Many thanks for the socks, and I know I'll enjoy wearing them on cold nights when we get up at the front. I've secured a Christmas package label which I enclose so you can send them to me. Be sure and mail the package by November 20th. Please remember me to Bessie. Hope all is well and don't you catch the flu. I thoroughly enjoyed your letters and hope you write again soon. As ever yours, Shep.
Friday. Well, Shep, I think if the war lasts long enough, I will be a dandy bookkeeper. For the way the letters arrive, it keeps you busy looking up to see which ones you have answered. Yesterday morning, I received your 12th letter and the Stars and Stripes. And this afternoon, I got the 11th and also found a notice from the post office saying there was a registered package there for me. We had been downtown all day, and you can imagine the excitement when I found so much good news here. Yes, we got right in the machine and went back downtown, and you know I have so much curiosity. I couldn't wait until Christmas to peep. The collar is beautiful, and I have already been thinking what I'll put it on to show it up prettily. Shep, you were always so thoughtful of the ladies. One would think you had a sister. No, but always a plenty of girls, eh? Speaking of receiving mail, I'm glad you gave me a tip, for now I understand the other letters, for I feared one of those French maids had been serving you too much wine lately. Don't worry, I'll remember and not take you seriously for what I know about you. Dolly heard from Temp Wednesday, and he was right at the front, and oh, the horrible things he wrote about. He was in the Battle of St. Quentin, and was in a German dugout when writing. Said he had written you. He seems to think, too, that he will be home in 2 months. It sounds too good to be true, though. In my last letter, I believe I forgot to tell you the saddest news. Pete died about 10 days ago of pneumonia. He was only sick a few days, and at the same time Wicks and the baby were very ill with the flu. We phoned there yesterday, and they were getting along nicely and nearly well. I just can't take it in, for Pete came up in the machine with me from downtown just a day or so before he was taken sick. He was certainly one of the nicest and most congenial men I ever knew. And sending you Wicks's address, as I know you will want to write her, 1605 Hanover Avenue. I received a letter from Lieutenant Dozier, one of the men I knew at Camp Lee, and the same day Dolly received Temp's, and they were both at the front but hadn't met. Dozier is with the 1st Gas Regiment and has been in the trenches since September the 2nd, and he was writing October the 14th. I didn't have any idea they were kept in the trenches such a long time without going to a rest camp. Tell me, what's the reason? You seem not to admire the French women, or are you just kidding? You would like to know, for just the other day 2 soldiers told me I was so much like the French type. Yes, I heard the moon was still shining, but I refused to look at it. It isn't any fun to gaze at it by yourself. My gracious, man, don't compare me with heaven. Make me think I'm going to die soon. By the way, I've heard lots about those letters of Dear Mabel, for Dolly and I gave it in another book to Carolyn for her graduation present. I should have been wise and read it beforehand, but I didn't. Surely have enjoyed reading the Stars and Stripes, and Dolly insists you sent it to her because it was about 10th Division in it. Think we will take it doing and let the new news leader get some pointers for the paper. We have all read it through, and Mrs. Waddell asked to see it also, some of friends' fathers. The censor did let the picture pass this time, but says not to be so serious next time. Don't worry, for I'm afraid you will get all you want of this big show before it is over. Have often wondered where our friend the Austrian is. Wouldn't it be funny if he was a spy, but I can't imagine it. Am enclosing a pretty good tip to some of the boys over there. Think maybe it was written by Colonel Joe Lane Stearns. After censoring all those letters, you will be able to write up the engagements in the society column when you get back, yes? How's Bobby? Tell him hello and the best of luck. Can't imagine you as a lawyer, for I remember perfectly on several occasions you refused to argue. Well, Shep, we won't argue the subject any longer. Comprenez-vous? That time, am I glad to keep you and will be in good spirits. Hope you will see Temp soon. He would surely be crazy about seeing you. Best of luck, Dolly. What do you know? The nerve of some children butting in on my conversation. Inquisitive man, I'm fat. You know, everyone isn't affected the same way. Oh, how I hate to talk about myself. Wednesday. Dear Shep, well, I beat you to it this time, for I received your 13th letter in 18 days, but I've gotten them in 12 days. Dolly wanted to fight when I got a letter today, and she didn't, but Tim's letters are always so delayed because he is at the front and is moving around so much. Margaret Ward came over this morning from McGuire's school, where she is teaching, and spent the day, and she, Dolly, Billy, and I went downtown this afternoon. Had to stop at her house to get 2 letters from her lover. He has a government position in Washington. He was taken with the flu while here one weekend, so when the government found out, it sent him out to the hospital at West Hampton. John McKee was the first wounded soldier from overseas to be sent out there. He was slightly wounded and contracted rheumatism from it. See him real often on the street. Looks pretty sporty with his misplaced eyebrow, 2 silver bars, overseas camp, and hobbling on a cane. They have just organized a girls' motor corps, and I saw Miss Hawes, not Miss Catherine, driving an ambulance up Broad Street this afternoon. No, I haven't joined yet, although from my costume in the picture you would think so. Don't my little assistant look cute, but oh, the other one. Wondered if you had received the first magazines I sent for you. Thanked me for them, but didn't say whether you had gotten them. I took the Stars and Stripes down the other day and the clipping and put it in the paper about Tim's division. Also had them mention what Richmond men were in it. Got an awfully sweet note from Wicks today. We haven't been down, as I didn't know whether she would be afraid of the whooping cough. Speaking of the whooping cough, I fooled you, for I'm not so old as you think. Father was telling us about a letter he read from John Newton Christian. He is with the McGuire unit over there and has been to the front several times. A bomb dropped in the camp and wounded 3 Richmond boys, but didn't say who they were. Tonight's paper has First Lieutenant James F. Hughes' picture, a former Richmond Blues. He was wounded in action and lost his eyesight, but can now see and expects to leave the hospital soon. Last night's paper said Charles Sands had died from wounds received when his plane was brought down by the Germans. At first he was reported missing, then the paper said he had been located in a German camp, so guess he died while in camp. Was just leaving Grace's yesterday when your letter came, so she insisted I stay and hear it. Think I will ask her to tuck my socks in her box, and as I am afraid the war will be over and you over here before you get them. Was surprised to see from your letter today that you were still at Camp de Mousson, but you ought to be glad you are, from all I hear from the front, but of course you are like all the rest. I'm afraid I will have to use carbon paper, for I just can't remember everything I write. Probably I said I lost the diamond out of my ring and found it a day after down in the crack in the flooring of the machine. Wasn't I lucky for once? What do you mean, only one as I know of has announced her engagement? But I don't blame you for thinking she has a whole bunch, or all, as you expressed it. Now surely Kitty hasn't announced hers. But speaking of that engagement, for February 1st, it sounds good to me. Be sure and be here, though for you, how many girls hate to have men break engagements? Can't think what Gilliam family you are speaking of, unless Marshall Gilliam, but he is married then. I think he wasn't in the first draft. By the way, I have my lace collar put away in Dolly's cedar chest, and I'm not going to tell a soul about it until Christmas. Thursday morning. Sleep called me last night before I could finish this. Hurrah! What do you know about the grand news? Sounds too good to be true. Think we ought to celebrate like they used to do Christmas Eve. The saying of the AEF is pretty clever, but what do you think of our country's emblem? The lily of France may fade, the thistle and shamrock wither, the oak of England may decay, but the stars shine on forever. Hope you got your wish and went to the front, but aren't the worse for wear. Eliz.
Dear Liz, I haven't heard from you for over a week, but as all of our mail has been sent to our new location at the front, I am hoping to find one from you when I arrive there. Our brigade has already started to move and we are scheduled to leave in a few days, so I am hoping and praying I get there before it all ends, but the Kaiser will have to be mighty quick about it to be where we are now. There was a rumor here yesterday that peace has been arranged and it flew over the camp like wildfire. You would have laughed yourself to death and have seen the French guards and German prisoners shaking hands and saying La guerre finie. When going back to their stockade at night, every German who passed us seemed to be smiling and in the happiest frame of mind possible. Some of the officers were in Vannes, and they say there was great rejoicing among the people there. The souvenir stand seemed to be worried, though, and asked, Américain partout de suite? However, it really ends in a few days. There is lots to be done, and I'll consider myself fortunate to be home next fall. Is anything doing in football in Richmond this year, and what are the prospects for a game Thanksgiving? Nearly a month ago, I wrote to Hammond Company to send you some flowers for Thanksgiving, and also instructed them to call you up and find out if you wanted chrysanthemums for something else, to suppose you have heard from them and hope they arrived all right and in time. By the way, did you ever receive the lace collar and wooden shoes I sent you from Vannes? I don't suppose there will be any duty on them, but please let me know if there is. Did I write you we had a priest now for a chaplain? He seems to be very nice and is popular with boys. I just heard today that my division had been cited in orders twice for good work, and that part of our train at the fort has been complicated very much on their work. I have subscribed for the Stars and Stripes for 6 months to be sent to you. Thought you would like to know what we are doing. Enclosed you will find Nanine and Rantuition. They are worn as charm against shells and airplanes by the French, and have become quite a fad. These two represent Parisian chimney sweep. Heard from Irma a few days ago, and she seems to be artfully happy. Darn if I don't believe there is something in this marriage game after all. Yours as ever, Shep.
Sunday. Dear Shep, after all that excitement, and to think it wasn't true, but it will be before you receive this. They say when the news was received in Washington Thursday, the people went wild. All the government clerks took French leave, and with a band, everybody paraded up Pennsylvania Avenue by the White House, and the president came out and waved. In Wall Street, they had to close the stock exchange. Now, where is it really, so the people will be afraid to be too? Hilarious for fear, isn't so? Of course, the Journal had the extras out, and when Father came home, the paper at dinner, we wouldn't believe it at first, but the paper said it was officially announced. I surely felt like going down Broad Street with a big jazz band. Oh, boys. This town was surely alive yesterday and today. Yesterday afternoon, Bess, Dolly, Billy, and I went down in the machine to see the sights. 90% of the men at Camp Lee were allowed over, besides plenty of sailors from the aviation camp. Broad Street looked like Christmas Eve. Last night was the end of the war-saving stamp drive. In the afternoon, the jazz band from the aviation camp and 2 large trucks stopped at nearly every corner on Broad Street and had a concert, and someone made a speech. Dolly and I joined the Victory Club, and our names will be put down in the book from which will be kept in the Capitol. A girl from the Lyric climbed up the fire engine ladder every time anyone subscribed. She went up a rung until she went over the top. Met Mrs. McKee, Grace, and Annalisa, so we were together all afternoon. We all felt devilish, so decided to go to the Jefferson last night and see what excitement we could see. Never saw such a mob all around the balcony and in the lobby. The jazz band was playing where they have music, and the speaking was on the balcony, right at the top of the steps. A lady from Long Island said she would subscribe $1,000 for her grandchild if they raised $10,000 by 9:45. The man speaking said, "Come on, we want to get that New York money," and in a few minutes a Camp Lee man said he would subscribe $1,000 of Philadelphia money. We met him later, and he asked Dolly to call on his sister, who was coming down in her machine and would be here at the Jefferson next week. A Virginia man who enlisted in the Canadian forces in 1914 spoke. He had been wounded twice and gassed. The music in the dining room started at 10:30, but it didn't look a bit exciting in there. A few people started dancing in the palm garden, and in a few minutes the floor was packed. They danced everywhere, in and out, the palms and up and down the halls. While the speaking was going on, or rather between speeches where the band was playing, a captain and a girl started dancing in the lobby, then danced down those steep steps. Don't know how they did it, and looked graceful too, for I can hardly walk up them. They got some applause. We had been around the balcony, but when we heard they were dancing in the palm garden, we thought we would go up and get blue watching them dance, but before we knew it, we were dancing too. One of the men I met in the Army and Navy Club at night, the night it was opened, and he said I was the first girl he danced with down there. Came up and then we met lots more, and so got home at 1 a.m. While dancing around with the man from Lee, who should break but Lieutenant Dave Bruner. He is a high flyer now and stationed at Langley Field. Also saw Purdue. See by today's paper, the people are going to be allowed to send packages over by parcel post, so look out for one, for it will be on its way by Tuesday. Dolly hasn't heard from Temp for 2 weeks, and he was right at the front. He wrote about such horrible things he had witnessed that Dolly is worried to death because she hasn't heard. Have decided to economize on shoes this winter, and am knitting myself woolen hose, not as heavy as the men's, though to wear with Oxfords. Saw Mary Mercer Leary downtown the other afternoon, and she had just heard from Dave, and he had been in the trenches 5 days without removing his clothes and hadn't washed his face. Said he had as many cooties as the law allowed one man to have over there. We went over to Lambert's Thursday afternoon and took William, the first time we had been over since he had had the whooping cough. The Lambert baby is a year old and walking, and you would have a scream seeing them run down the halls after each other. Lambert came in while we were there and was most cordial, wanted us to come over to supper sometime and play cards. They have a cow, and he does the milking. Can you imagine it? Was up until 2 a.m. last night, so guess it wouldn't hurt to get a little sleep. Au revoir, Eliz. Monday, 6 a.m. Armistice signed. Isn't that too wonderful to be true? But it sure is.
Although the armistice was signed on November the 11th, Sheppard's return from France was delayed by several months as he would be instrumental in the foundation of the American Legion in Paris. Upon his return, on February the 13th, 1922, Sheppard and Elizabeth were married. They would spend their next 38 years together at Meadow Farm in Glen Allen. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we would love to hear from you in the comments. If you could place some of your memories or some of your experiences during this current pandemic, we would love to hear from you. We would love to, as historians, to chronicle that in this current age of pandemic in 2020. But thank you for joining us. Hope to see you soon, and stay safe.